if he were to implement across-the-board tariffs, he would wreck the trading system. He would wreck the supply chains. He would cause enormous disruptions, and he could, on day one, as you just read his first threat or promise or fulfillment of his mandate, call it what you will, on day one, he's going to begin to revive the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. I'm so thrilled to have George Will, columnist for the Washington Post. The Post is honoring his writing and his legacy this week on the 50th anniversary of his tenure at the paper with a series of tributes, including by our own Mona Charen. And there was also a delightful quiz with George Will quotes that I'd recommend that you take. I did just so on it. His books include American Happiness and Discontents and The Conservative Sensibility. Welcome back to the Bulwark Podcast, George Will. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
I'm okay. My puckish impulse required that I wear this denim shirt, so I apologize for that in advance, but I just couldn't help myself this morning.
I've written, somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 columns, and that's the one people remember most as my harangue against the ubiquity of denim.
Yeah, that's maybe not the one I remember most, but it does stick with you. It does stick with you for sure. I want to spend a bunch of time on your columns and your career, but alas, we are tormented to live in interesting times, and I need to start with a little bit of news, if that's okay, to get your response to. We have the latest decree from our new president-elect on his social media feed. I'm going to read it to you. On January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, so on the grammar there, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders. The tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. Both Mexico and Canada have the absolute right and power to easily solve this long-simmering problem. We hereby demand that they use this power, and until such time that they do, it's time for them to pay a very big price. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, first thought is so much for those who said his threats were just negotiating ploys. Second, the country is going to be rudely awakened to the fact that Congress has, through its lassitude, conferred upon presidents enormous powers that are actually vested by the Constitution in Congress, that Congress has the power to regulate trade with foreign nations. Third, he hasn't even begun to get to the bottom of the bag of tricks the modern president can have because of excessive delegations of power from Congress. That is, I don't know, I think we're operating as a nation under something like 41 emergencies right now. Congress allows presidents to declare emergencies, at which point they acquire an enormous discretion. My hope for the next 4 years is that they revive Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike. It's been a bipartisan failure, this encrusting like so many barnacles, the presidency with all kinds of discretions and powers they should not have. So my hope is that we're going to have a rethinking of the presidency itself. And the Democrats particularly, who, being progressives, and progressives celebrate executive power, untrammeled executive power and the administrative state and all that, that Republicans and Democrats are going to rethink how we might reestablish the Madisonian equilibrium between the branches.
Is that a wish or an expectation?
It's
I guess because it feels more like a wish to me, but I would love to be convinced otherwise.
It is a wish, but what Madison said was that the branches should be rivalrous. He didn't anticipate the coming of the party system and the coming of a presidential-centric politics, under which the president's party in Congress is considered mere appendages to salute sharply and tug their forelocks and implement his agenda. My 19th century Whiggish belief builds upon Madison's belief in the primacy of the legislature, the Congress's the first branch of government. It's Article 1 for a reason in the Constitution. The president's powers are basically, at least in domestic affairs, to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. That makes him secondary and responsive to the first branch of government, the Congress. So you ask, is this the wish being father to the thought? Yes, but it's a wish that I think Mr. Trump, by the curious laws of political physics, is apt to provoke. Every action having an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah, I hope that's right. And I do appreciate your sunny disposition. It provides a nice balance to the more negative thoughts that usually pervade here at the Bulwark. So I do I kind of want to get underneath the potential negatives. I mean, you implied there in the first answer that this is just the beginning of the potential bag of tricks. If Congress were not to act on the Madisonian impulse and were to decide not to check him, like what do you worry about most from the executive branch in a second Trump term?
A recession that will cause the grass to grow in the streets of American cities. That is, if he were to implement across the board tariffs, 10, 20%, the numbers he's thrown out during the campaign were simply whims and reflexes on his part. But were he to do this, he would wreck the trading system. He would wreck the supply chains. He would cause enormous disruptions and be a one-term president. He's going to be that anyway. He could, on day one, as you just read his first threat or promise or fulfillment of his mandate, call it what you will, on day one, he's going to begin to revive the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I should add that in addition to that long post bleat that he sent about Mexico and Canada, he also said that he plans to do an additional 10% tariff on China across the board. So that is our new conservative governance. We're going to get to that in a second. I'm curious your thoughts also just on the cabinet from a big picture standpoint. You wrote about the need to for the Senate to reject Gates, Hegseth, Gabbard, and Kennedy in a recent column. I liked how you called Gates a arrested development adolescence with the swagger of a sequin guitarist in a low-rent casino. It was nice that you got that one off before he exited stage right. But I'm wondering, since you've written that column, there's been a spate of other picks. I'm kind of wondering your big picture thoughts on what the cabinet choices tell us.
Well, it's a sharply divided cabinet. There are the four there who simply should not be confirmed or not qualified by experience or thought. The new Treasury Secretary, from what little I read about him, is a skeptic about protectionism, which should make for some interesting dialogues between the White House and the Treasury building right next door. The new Energy Secretary, I've forgotten his name, but he gets very good reviews. Agriculture Secretary, if we're going to have one, she seems perfectly adequate. I tend to think that Lincoln's biggest mistake was not sticking with General McClellan too long, but in creating the Agriculture Department. But there it is. It's like the Education Department. What can you do about it?
Was Lincoln's biggest mistake not keeping his first vice president? I believe that was maybe his biggest mistake. Sticking with Hannibal Hamlin.
That was a big one. We'll take Andrew Johnson, the Agriculture Department, and McClellan. You can pick the big three of his mistakes.
Okay.
I'm from Central Illinois, Lincoln Country, and we don't admit to a fourth.
Fair. Chris Wright is the Energy Secretary. I was blanking on his name too. I worry about the foreign policy picks the most. And I'd throw in there the NATO ambassador, Matt Whitaker, who is an absurd selection for NATO ambassador. I'm confident cannot name the NATO member countries, or couldn't at least before his nomination. And I'm interested in your view on, like, no matter how this kind of shakes out, do you think that the American-led international order is now permanently broken? I guess
not yet.
This is simple.
Not yet, and it could be. Again, let's go back to the physics of politics. It could be that Mr. Trump is going to through sheer terror, galvanize a more responsible defense commitment to Europe's self-defense. We shall see. Getting all those nations above the 2% of GDP spent on defense. I share entirely your belief that everything else pales next to the axis we're now confronting: Iran, North Korea, China, and Russia. I believe it is not too much to say that historians looking back on this might say that we're already in the early stages of a third world war. A lot of Americans, I think, tend to think the Second World War started at Pearl Harbor. Some others with a more spacious view of history say, no, it was when the Germans invaded Poland on the 1st of September, 1939. Others would say, well, it was the great rehearsal in the Spanish Civil War when Germany and Italy intervened there, or when Italy invaded Abyssinia, as Ethiopia then was, in 1935. Actually, it seems to me a number of historians say the coming together, the clustering of crises that became World War II began with the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in 1931. In that sense, we can imagine historians several generations from now saying that a serious world conflagration began in the 5 or 6 years ago. Began, perhaps they would say, with the Russia's annexation of Crimea.
Y'all, the search is over. HexClad is the perfect gift for your significant other this holiday season, at least if your significant other is the one that does the cooking in the family, because they will absolutely love it. And it's secretly a gift for you as well, because HexClad's non-stick and stainless steel hybrid technology means that the meals are going to taste better and cleanup is so much easier. So don't blow it again this year with some terrible gift. Say I love you with the gift of HexClad, even though what you're really thinking is that doing the dishes is going to be easier for you for the rest of your life. That's right. HexClad has a lifetime warranty. These are literally the last set of pots and pans you will ever have to buy. Literally. It's time to upgrade your kitchen and your relationship. For a limited time, you can shop HexClad's biggest sale of the year and save up to 42% off. Just go to hexclad.com/thebulwark. Get the best deals of the year and support our show at HexClad.com/thebulwark. I got some pans. They sent me some pans. I got a wok. I got a little saucepan. And I can tell you, I've used both over the last week. And they ain't lying. They ain't lying. The cleanup is much easier. My little, Papa's special pasta came out, tasted nice and yummy. And you're not going to be surprised to learn probably that I don't do the cleanup in the family. But Tyler tells me that it was much better, much easier. I'm a messy cook. I know that's probably not going to surprise you either. So very pumped to get the HexClad wok and saucepan. You should get that as well. HexClad truly checks every single box when it comes to picking your cookware. They're metal utensil safe, dishwasher safe, and oven safe up to 500 degrees. They're induction ready and even have a stay cool handle so you can saute with ease. Whether you're treating yourself or looking for that perfect gift, now is the time to snag the cookware that everyone's talking about. For a limited time only, our listeners can shop HexClad's biggest sale of the year for up to 42% off with our exclusive link. Just head to hexclad.com/thebulwark to unlock their best deals of the year. Support our show and check them out at HexClad.com/thebulwark. Bon appetit. Let's eat with HexClad's revolutionary cookware. Happy cooking and happy Thanksgiving. Hey, y'all, if you love this podcast and want to listen to all Bulwark podcasts ad-free, join Bulwark Plus today. You can click the link in this description. You'll get the best politics newsletters in the business, and you can become a Bulwark Plus member right now. We'd appreciate it. Well, I wonder, and we can't see the future, so I do wonder what the knowns are, whether or not, like, what has been made clear, I guess, at this point, is that maybe the American-led world order can maintain, maybe our alliances can maintain, But if you're taking the view from Europe and watching us, looking back at us, you cannot look at us and think of us as a reliable partner, I guess, at this point anymore. And it's very clear that like the American public does not care that much about its international commitments, at least a plurality of them. And so does that not change their actions? And I guess you kind of implied it also is potentially influencing the actions of the Axis powers. I wonder what you think about that.
I don't want to say that isolationism is the default position of the American people. That would be too strong. But against the sweep of American history, if you go back to 1938 and 1939, when Franklin Roosevelt carefully, not to say guilefully, maneuvered the United States into engagement in the Second World War, the American people, what they generally want from foreign policy is as little of it as possible. And you can understand this. It goes way back to the broad oceans and the two placid neighbors that we have in the general sense that predates intercontinental flight and ICBMs and all the rest, that we are somehow safe. The period between 1940-41 and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 does look like an aberrant period. However, I think it is possible for political leadership to convince the American people that what they do care about constantly, which is prosperity, full employment, rapid economic growth, rapid enough to throw off the revenues to pay the bills for the entitlement system, that depends, absolutely depends, on free trade. We're going to have an enormous argument now about protectionism, which is, as I and others have said, equivalent to a nation blockading its own ports. The president-elect really seems to believe that if he imposes tariffs on Chinese goods, China pays the tariffs, which is, of course, preposterous. The point of protectionism is to raise domestic prices. That is what they're for. And the American people, it seems to me, if they get a good jolt of protectionism, might swing back to understanding that the great burst of American prosperity at the end of the Depression, right through 2024, was absolutely dependent upon international trade.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that to be true. I hope it's true that it gives the jolt people need. It does make you wonder, though. There was my friend Stephen Richer, who acted very admirably as a recorder in Maricopa County amidst all of the Kerry Lake and Donald Trump nonsense. He sent a tweet a couple months ago that stuck with me. That I went back and found. It said, "We've gone from the party of George Will to the party of Cat Turd." And I want to upgrade that in kind of a sad way, which is, and the party of Cat Turd was successful, and I do wonder like how you process that, right? That this party that you were so central to kind of left you, at least ideologically, principally in what you're just discussing with free trade, but across a number of issues, and dumbed itself down, and that worked. That's got to be a little bit of a depressing realization.
Yeah, I would destroy my reputation if I became a little ray of sunshine, but let me still look on the bright side, which I'm not accustomed to doing. There is an equipoise in our politics that is going to take hold here. The Democratic Party is capable of learning. It has done in the past. The Republican Party is capable of learning. It has done in the past. And it's surely important to understand that the good news about the bad news about Mr. Trump is this. The bad news is he showed how one feral candidate can change the tone of the country. I think it is possible that a non-feral candidate, someone with the opposite of his approach to public rhetoric, could change it back. I do think that the country is ripe for, and 4 years from now will really be ripe for, what I would call a deep breath candidate. Someone who comes to the country and says, deep breath, everybody relax, been through worse before, who says, as Lincoln did at the end of his first inaugural, we're not enemies, we are friends, we must not be enemies. See, I just don't believe the American people are angry. There are 334 million of us. At any point, 324 million are not watching cable television, not listening to talk radio. They're getting on with life. They're exhausted and embarrassed by our public life. And someone needs to come along who says, as Bill Lee, the governor of Tennessee, said, I'm a conservative, I'm just not angry about it. And I think you're going to find that there's a market out there, that our political parties are exquisitely sensitive market mechanisms, and they adjust quickly. As I say, we've been through worse before. I've just been reading a whole bunch of books about the 1850s, and I recommend that as an antidote to exaggerating the dangers that we're currently in.
Yeah. I guess I don't know that I'm exaggerating the dangers, but I think I pretty clearly see the sins, the flaws, the darkness that allowed us to get here. And I wonder how you think about that. I don't know. Do you? I'm doing my best to just bring you down from the sunniness into the night here a little bit. And you may be true. You may be right. Maybe a sunny optimist can take us out of this in 2028. But it still says something about, I think, us as a country and the conservative movement in particular that we got here. So I wonder if you look back on that 50 years and think, is there anything that you look back on and think, ugh, I should have seen that this was heading to this place?
I became a columnist in January 1973, actually, with National Review, and beginning to submit columns to the Post. January 1973 was when Judge Sirica in Washington began to impose draconian sentences on the Watergate burglars in a successful attempt to crack the cover-up. So I dipped my toe into punditry just as the Watergate waves were rising. So maybe I'm inured to the fact that there is much ruin in a nation, and we have our fair share of it. But again, protectionism doesn't work. It's morally wrong to interfere with free transactions of free people, but leave that aside, it doesn't work. The Democrats have found out what doesn't work. Hectoring people, a kind of hectoring progressivism, doesn't work. They will adjust. And we learn as a nation, as individuals, by our mistakes, our blunders. And the Democrats have made whopping one, and we're still making one on the Republican side. But we are creatures who learn. That's the foundation, such as it is, of my sunniness. We learn by trial and hard error, but we learn.
One thing I learned about you, kind of reading the anniversary columns in the Post that I didn't know. I'm from Colorado. Was that you were working for a Colorado senator, actually, around the time that you just referenced, I guess a little bit before 73, who ends up losing in part, maybe because Nixon's coattails weren't as long as they could have been. And you end up in this early period around Watergate and around impeachment, being a young conservative columnist who is harshly critical of Nixon from the right. So there is sort of a bookend element to this, that you are now critical of Trump. But I wonder talk to me just about that moment and like what gave you the chutzpah to do that. We see now that's a lot harder than it seems.
Well, it's funny because with National Review, which I was writing for at the time, beginning in January 1973, was then, even more than now, I think, supported in part by contributions. And some of the contributors didn't really warm to Nixon until he got into trouble. And National Review would do, as I recall, it's been a long time, they would do an analysis of the mail they got. And they had a category called subscription cancellations in George Will. They were the same thing because I was annoying people. Bill, to his enormous credit, with this financially shaky enterprise, this magazine that he'd started in 1955, Bill never once tried to restrain what I was writing about Mr. Nixon. I'm deeply indebted to him for that, and it's a sign of what a large person Bill was.
I appreciate your compliments of him, but this is maybe one moment to give some self congratulation. We'll allow it for just the next 1 minute. Because I wonder, like, what do you think it was about George Will that gave you the spine to twice, speak out in ways that went against the grain of the party? And we've seen many of your peers from, just speaking to the Trump era, the Nixon era is before my time, but many of your peers, the columnists, the commentators who agree with you, who are classically liberal, who believe in Enlightenment values, and who succumbed to Trump. I don't need to name them all. We all know them. Well, like, what do you think it was that made you differentiate from that?
Well, let's go backward to start with Trump. Trump was not a close call. As I wrote at the time, with every sulfuric belch from his campaign in 2015, it was obvious that this man was unsuited for what he was trying to be. And at that point, I was an established columnist, and I didn't need to worry very much. Maybe back in 1973, I was too naive to understand I was taking a risk. But what's the point of doing this if you don't say what you think? If I wanted to be in politics, I know how to do that. I could have stayed in politics. I was a Senate staff member, and I had a chance to continue being a political staffer, but I chose to be a writer. And what's the point of writing if you're not free to express yourself? I wouldn't do it otherwise. Just makes no sense.
That's correct. Maybe you hit the sweet spot, right? You were young and brash for Nixon and seasoned for Trump. Though I guess that there are plenty of seasoned people who went along with Trump. So I guess that would let some people off the hook.
The most important virtue you can have as a political writer is a certain indifference to public opinion. Jefferson wrote in the Declaration about a decent respect for the opinion of mankind, implying that there's such a thing as an indecent respect for public opinion. Just try to avoid that.
Obviously, Bill Clinton had famously said in a State of the Union while trying to recover his political fortunes that the era of big government is over. It's hard not to sit here right now and think that the era of small government is over.
The era of small government was over in 1965 with the passage of Medicare and Medicaid. The two most popular programs in America are Medicare and Social Security, and they, combined with Medicaid, are 70% of the budget. We have made a decision as a people that we're going to have a large ethic of common provision. There's going to be a safety net of increasing thickness. That argument's over. I've backed enough lost causes that I know a lost cause when I see one, and the idea that we're going to undo the welfare state is preposterous. Still, there are intelligent ways of having a big government. There are unintelligent ways. We're still living with the echo of the Great Society of the 1960s it seems to me, family disintegration and chaotic neighborhoods. The conservative mission now is to make a government that does embody an ethic of common provision compatible with vigorous local communities, compatible with federalism, compatible with experiments at the state level. That's still a great and stately mission for conservatism.
I was reading one of your anti-Jones Act polemics about the ports and the overregulation of the ports. This is in maybe an area where we can have where smart small government conservatism can still exist. And as I was reading the article, I'm happy to hear you riff about that if you want, but it also made me wonder if you were if Trump called you up tomorrow and said, okay, or Elon Musk called you and said, I want to get rid of the stupidest things that we have in our government, a couple of really particularly pernicious rules or regulations. I was wondering what you would have picked.
Well, the Jones Act, which I won't bore your listeners with, which restricts to certain kinds of ships what we can goods that can be carried between American ports. That would start. The Buy American provisions would be part of them. A radical simplification of the tax code. I mean, if these guys were really radical, they could try and say, let's get rid of the income tax and have a consumption tax. That would be worth considering. To me, the most important
that would be a little. I mean, that would be regressive. No, that's not. That doesn't any down.
You can fiddle it in lots of ways to make it less regressive, but I don't particularly mind regressive taxes. I think the title of a very famous book about 60 years ago was called "The Uneasy Case for Progressive Taxation."
I don't know. This is where I might have gone fully native now that Trump might have caused a reaction in me. But here in Louisiana, we've increased the sales tax and cut the income tax by another %. And I'm thinking, I don't know. I'd rather not have that extra couple grand and not make people pay an extra few cents on their Coke or on their orange juice or whatever. Is that right? Am I a hopeless progressive now?
No. That's the conservative catechism is more elastic than that. Okay. So you won't be excommunicated for that. But the one thing that the Trump administration might do, which is take on the most wicked, I use such language sparingly, the most wicked force in American life are the teachers' unions. And the best thing that can be done, and enormous progress has been made in the last 5-10 years, to spread school choice everywhere. Arizona, under Governor Doug Ducey, good Republican, has really shown the way, but other states are not far behind. Universal school choice is the best thing we could do for the United States.
I do think, sir, that the Trump administration is going to challenge that notion and I think that they will find some more wicked forces within us. Though I don't necessarily disagree with the policy recommendation. I'm concerned about the wickedness ahead. How many people in the world would you guess have been forced to flee their homes? 1 million? 10 million? What if I told you the number was 122.6 million? If that were a country, it would be the 6th largest in the world. Every day, people all around the world leave their homes because of violence, ethnic, religious, or territorial conflict, persecution, political upheaval, climate-related events. In 58 countries, people on the move look to Jesuit refugee services for help. JRS is a ministry of the Jesuits, the Catholics you might know best for their schools and universities. Their work in education is especially meaningful here as they operate schools and refugee camps and offer job training, mental health support, and community building programs worldwide to support those who have had to leave behind everything they know to keep themselves and their families safe. JRS is known for going where others don't and staying long after others have left. Standing in solidarity with those experiencing the impacts of world events others have forgotten about. Their mission is to accompany, serve, and advocate for forcibly displaced people so they can heal, learn, and determine their own futures. I talked about this before, but the Jesuits are great. I got my issues with the Catholics at times that I'm dealing with. But I went to Jesuit high school in Denver, Regis. And I think that a big part of my moral formation happened at home too, but it happened at Regis. And I think the Jesuits have a view of the world, a view of caring for others and serving others, a view of not putting yourself first, that really speaks to people no matter what your faith background is. We just interviewed George Will today. He called himself a low impact atheist, I think was his phrase, even for low impact atheists. The Jesuit worldview works in that kind of small c Catholic sense, the universal. And I got to tell you, I just maybe it was a little too late in life that I took some of the advice some of the Jebby teachers I had gave me, but I definitely hear them inside when I think about the turn into the light that I've made over the last few years. So I recommend the Jebbies. I love this particular effort, the refugee services. Our wedding, we asked people to donate to refugee services instead of in lieu of gifts, and it's something I'm passionate about. It's maybe the number one issue I'm the most passionate about. And so if you're looking for something to support this holiday season, I recommend JRS. It's been a rough few weeks. If you want to do something good today, go visit JRS USA online, read some of the stories about their work, and then make a donation or look at other ways of supporting JRS's work, like advocacy or volunteering. To check them out and show the Bulwark sent you, visit jrsusa.org/bulwark. That's jrsusa.org/bulwark. I want to end on a little happier note, though. You wrote this in 1991 about happiness. Politics is not crucial to the principal ingredients of happiness. Cheerful children, feisty friends, fulfilling work, and a strong bullpen were the things that you said were crucial. Many of our listeners, I think, are struggling on this point right now, finding not letting politics impact their happiness. So I'm just wondering if you'd like to revise and extend those remarks with 33 more years of wisdom.
Not really. Look, a good citizen worries about the country, and there's much to worry about here. But as I say, protectionism and all the rest is going to refute itself. The Democrats have learned just the high risk of crossing certain red lines and the sensibility of the American people. Donald Trump worries about trade deficits. I have a chronic and incurable trade deficit with my barber. Every 4 weeks, I buy a haircut from her, and she never buys anything from me. Somehow it works out. And we need to have a little more faith in the somehow it works out of life, because this extraordinarily complicated world we live in, this enormously complicated economy that requires of us what Hayek called epistemic humility. Don't mess with this complicated thing, or you're going to get burned. So the great hope for conservatism is, and it's a huge one, conservatism is true. It works, and the alternatives don't work. So we're going to come out of this. But for the minority of people who read op-ed pieces, what I do, it's a self-selected minority. Most Americans don't read newspapers. Most newspaper readers don't read the op-ed pages. But what that means is we have a small, self-selected, intellectually upscale audience of people whose mental pantry shelves are stocked with opinions and facts and worries and judgments. It's a minority conversation, but worth having, because minorities, salient minorities, propel history. So for those who you were talking about, who are depressed and whose life is under a gray cloud because of what the American electorate has done, get out and go to work. Democracy rests on persuasion, but persuasion means on opinion, it's shiftable sand. Go out and shift the sand, change the opinions. I've been doing it for 50 years, and I'd be hard put to name a column of my 5,000 or 6,000 that's made a big difference. But what you do is you keep hoping that the cumulative effect somehow matters.
You said your great hero is Madison. You've referenced him several times in our half hour. Might you leave us with a favorite Madison quote or passage?
We see throughout our system the process of supplying by opposite and rival interests the defect of better motives. Federalist 51. And in Federalist 10, he brought off a revolution in democratic theory. before Madison, the few people who had believed that democracy was possible anywhere at any time believed that it had to be in a small face-to-face society like Pericles' Athens or Rousseau's Geneva, because the enemy of democracy was factions, a plurality of interests and warring factions. Madison said that's exactly wrong. He said in Federalist 10 that you want to have an extensive republic, because there the government can perform its first duty, which is to protect the different and unequal capacities of acquiring property. So you have a saving multiplicity of factions, because what is the great danger in politics? Tyranny. To what form of tyranny is a democracy prey? Tyranny of the majority. Solution: don't have stable tyrannical majorities. Have majorities that consist of unstable coalitions of factions that don't last very long and therefore can't be a big danger. There's your short seminar on Madison in a minute and a half.
And well, that's actually a good reason for optimism, if you think about it. That hopefully the potential tyranny or the wannabe tyrant that we're dealing with now won't be long lasting from that Madisonian framework. George Will, what an honor, what a treat! Thank you so much for coming onto the Bulwark podcast.
I enjoyed it. We'll do it again.
All right, we'll see you soon.